So obviously, hope you enjoyed your workshop tour earlier with Sammy.
Yep, very good.
Hope they looked after you in the tea rooms. So what I'm going to do is I explained to you when you all first came in. My name's Sharon. I'm Sammy's museum manager. I'm his event coordinator. In this trials section, I'm just going to talk just briefly a little bit about Sammy's trials history. I'm not going to go into technical details because a lot of you are motorcyclists and you probably know far more than I do. So it's just a bit of a potted history of Sammy and the trials. So as you know, he was born in 1933. Before he really got famous in trials, he was doing road racing in Ireland. There's a few bikes through into, oh no, Fergus, sorry about this. This is Fergus, this is Rose, so this is Fergus. Fergus belongs to Rosemary, who's Sammy's wife. Okay. Let's put you down, you can have a little run around. So before he really got into trials, Sammy did road racing while he still lived in Ireland. When you go into the racing hall, you will find a couple of bikes of his, which I'll be more than happy to show you. He was a works rider for NSU, his Sport Max is in there, he then became a works rider for Mondial. It was at the end of 1957, at the road racing season, that Sammy came to the crossroads. Am I going to stay with road racing? Am I going to concentrate on trials? And due to a few technicals to do with the FIM and various other bits and pieces and various other European teams pulling out of the road racing, he decided he would go into trialling. So this was 1957 when his crux came. But prior to that, Sammy had been doing trialling, and this new Imperial, so this photograph here is a very young Sammy, a teenager Sammy, aboard not this particular bike, but one like it. This is the new Imperial 150cc, and in 1951 he won his first scratch race on trials riding one like this. He was able to purchase this just over a year ago in a really rough condition and has restored it back to how it was when he was riding it. So this was one of his very first trials bikes that he rode. He also had a James that he rode as well, but the main one that he started to become famous for is SHS. This is called, it's the Samuel Hamilton Special. 200cc Villiers engine, and this was purely made out of bits and pieces. Sammy's father, when he was 16 years old, helped him to purchase an engine, and through beg, steal and borrow, scrap yards, etc., he built the SHS. It's got different awards he's won on it, a Newcomers Award, the 1954 Scottish 6-day trial, he won the Best Newcomers Award, and that was really when Sammy started to kick off really enjoying trials. Although he was still a works rider, because it was only odd weekends, it wasn't every weekend, Sammy was working Monday to Friday to make his way pay, and then trialling at weekends because that's what he really liked. So he was running that for a few years. Obviously after the new Imperial, but he was having a few problems with it. Along the way, as I say, he did have a James that he rode for a few years, and a few other bits and pieces. And as I say, then in 1957, his crossroads came. He decided to bail out of road racing, and that's when he accepted a job with Ariel, and he moved from Belfast over to Solihull, and he accepted the job with Ariel. Now the famous Gov 132, always known by its registration number. This is not the exact bike. It is a replica now because Sammy reproduced it. When Sammy got hold of the bike, it had been purchased by Ralph Venables. There'd been an auction and Ralph had seen it up for sale and there was a chance it was going to go overseas. Sammy didn't have a museum or anything at this time. We're talking about 10, 15 years ago. No longer than that. And Ralph purchased it. It was in a really rough state, and he came to Sammy and said, I will sell you your bike for £1 on the condition that A, you restore it back to how it was when you were racing, back to perfect condition, and you promise never ever to let it go out of this country. So when Sammy restored it, he hadn't opened his first museum, so it went down to Bewley for a few years, and then when Sammy opened his first museum in '83, it came from Bewley back down to there and then to here. Something very unique about this bike, which those of you that like technicalities may or may not know, you hear in the modern racing world they talk about heated tyres. Back in the late 50s, Sammy designed his exhaust. He put a little tube on it So it came onto the back of the mudguard, so the hot air from the exhaust continually heated his wheels, particularly during the winter time. So when it was icy, when it was cold, his wheels never froze up. It was one of his very early innovations that people then went on to copy. The board behind, these are all the races that Sammy won between 1957 and 1964 on this bike alone. Now I have to confess, it took me 6 months to pluck up the courage to ask Sammy a question, because I didn't understand what the difference between first and 500 was. And I finally asked him and said, Sammy, what's the difference between the two? And he looked at me, raised his eyebrows and said, first means I came first overall of all the classes, no matter what the CC, I was the overall winner. 500 means he just won the 500cc class. So the board says it all. He was 11 times British champion, 2 times European champion. He is the person that has won the Hurst trial the most successive times, the 6-day international, 6-day in Scotland rather, successive times. I mean, he's just done so much, and I don't think there will be another trials rider that will beat his achievements. So that's all about Gov 132. At the end of into the end of 64, he was approached by Senor Buto from the Bortaco firm to design a bike for him. Initially, Sammy said no. Rather cunningly, Senor Buto invited Sammy over to Spain, to his farm, for a week's holiday. Note the word holiday. And while he was there, he produced this trials bike, said to Sammy, give it a ride, tell me what you think. Sammy, being Sammy, was very honest, abrupt, and basically told him in no uncertain terms that it was rubbish and a pile of crap. And so Senor Buto asked Sammy if he would join the firm. After much discussion with Ariel, he decided to leave Ariel and he went over to Spain. This is one of the first Bortacos that came off the production line after Sammy redesigned. It's the Bortaco Sherpa. Sammy has raced it. It has also been displayed around the world at different trial schools, and obviously various other well-known riders went on to ride the Bortaco, and it got Spain into the trial scene. When you go upstairs, there at the very far end, there is another Bortaco with a green tank. That was probably one of the very last ones that Sammy ever designed that came off the production line. There's subtle differences, but the main thing when you look at this one is how very similar it is to Ariel. Because that had been so successful, he used a lot of the designs from Ariel onto the Bortaco. He kept making it lightweight, tweaking it, front forks, changed everything. So Bortaco then became kind of a world leader in trials. So he was with them for a while, backwards and forwards to Spain. He lived out there for a while. Then the Rickman brothers, who were only 10 minutes down the road, became the importer for Bortacos. So Sammy moved down to this part of the world, bought a little house down the road, and he used the Rickman workshops as his workshop so that he could redesign and continue working on the Bortacos. He was doing other bits and pieces at the same time, but his main concern was the Bortaco. So that's how he came to be here. At the end of the 60s, Sammy was headhunted by Honda. Honda, the Japanese, wanted to get into the trial market. They'd seen what he'd done with the Spanish. So again, they approached him, and again, typically Sammy, he said no because of his commitment with Senor Buto. But again, they then had an arrangement, and at the end of the 70s, early 70s, sorry, Sammy left Bortaco, and he went to the Japanese. He went over to their factory. None of them spoke English. He didn't speak Japanese, so there was a bit of a problem. So he came back to England for a while, made some new designs, and then went back over. And this is the design of one of the first Hondas that he produced for them. This one is actually dated from 1977, using his highboy frame. It's based on his very early designs that he did for them. And obviously it then went on to win a lot of championships, and it brought the Japanese into the trials market. Sammy, at the same time as working for Honda, started up his own parts business. As I say, he was living over here now, just down in Highcliffe. I don't know if any of you know the area, but Highcliffe's only 10 minutes down the road in that direction. He set up a small shop, started his parts business, Sammy Miller Products, where he started making small trials parts. He eventually went on to produce frames that people could buy in kit form so they could actually build their own Sammy Miller trials bike. So while he was enjoying doing that, he suddenly struck this idea: I'm doing all these parts for people, why don't I make my own trials bike? So he teamed up with one of his friends from Ariel, and they came up with the idea of developing it just simply called the Miller. This was in 1978. This is the only prototype there is. Towards the end of the 70s, trials riding and the purchase of trials bike was waning slightly. So there was a little bit of shall we, shan't we. He'd gone to Hero for his engine because they were very reliable, but at the time Hero were also umming and ahhing about what they were going to do, and they just wanted to stay with one supplier, and of course Sammy couldn't commit to how many engines or how successful the bike would be, so they decided not to do a partnership. The Miller is the only one that there is. It didn't go into production, but Sammy continued with his parts business. He was still riding professional trials into the mid-70s. He then gave up professional and just carried on doing local trials. On his 50th birthday, he reached the milestone of 1,000 trial wins from when he first started, which was quite a big achievement. He then said he was going to retire, but of course Sammy never retires, and he continued, and he went on. I think the total, we never know the exact total, but the total I have is 1,483 wins, professional wins, in his career. And as we said earlier, I don't think anybody will ever better that. No matter all the youngsters that are coming up, nobody will ever do better. So from Highcliffe, he moved 10 minutes that way, set up a bigger workshop and a showroom because his parts business was expanding. It was at that time he decided to start restoring bikes, and this is where the bug hit. As he always says, it's a hobby gone mad. His garage started bursting at the seams, so he purchased a plot of land on the opposite side of the road, and that's when he opened up his first museum in 1983. By the time 1994 came, he needed to look for bigger premises. This was a derelict farm. The original part of this museum is just where not even when you first came in, but this main hall and the upper bit. That was the barn, the original barn, the cow shed. So that's what opened up in 1996, and then over the years we've expanded until where we are now. This was fully completed in 2021. We had obviously a few issues. It was started at the end of 2019, but obviously we all know what happened in between 21 and 2021. But yeah, we did manage to finally get it finished, and in the July of 21 we had Lord March come down. Mr. Goodwood, he came down and he did the official opening for us, which was really good. This is the second reincarnation of this hall because the trials bikes weren't originally here when we first opened, they were down the other end. But with Sammy also being able to get hold of ISDT bikes, Works Aerial bikes, we've got Ron's bike, we've got the bike that Sammy rode in 1956, just when he was on an international 6-day trial, the Royal Enfield. This is his actual bike. Ex-Ken Heen's bike, so he's slowly collecting other bikes that are renowned. We've got the Rickmans, we've got Gordon Jackson's AJS just over the front there. So he's kind of now almost full up again because we've got the new wing. But you can't stop him, as he probably told you when he was in his workshop tour. He worked Monday to Friday, he's always down there, often on a Saturday. Normally Sundays, Rosemary, his wife, puts her foot down and says, right, we're going out. But yeah, he still rides. We've got a little trial section over in the far corner when you first came down the drive where the alpacas are. There are some boulders over in that far corner, which you may or may not have seen. It's regularly he will go over there with the little BSA, not the aerial because it's a bit too heavy for him now, and spend 10-15 minutes just keeping his hand in. Still does Banbury Run, still rides at Goodwood at the Festival of Speed. Yeah, you just can't stop him. And in November he will be 90 years old.
Also Chummerley up in Cheshire. Bike probably started everything. This was the SHS, the Samuel Hamilton Special. This is a little bike I built when I was 16, 17 years old and won my first races with. That's a photograph of myself on the Scottish 6 Day. when he got the second best newcomers award, the Ben Nevis Trophy.
This one's quite close to my heart. The SHS, the Samuel Hamilton Special. I made this little bike when I was 17 years old because I hadn't got the money for a new one. Built that out of bits and pieces. Managed to go to the Scottish Six Day and win the Best Newcomers Award, and I had my first wins on that little bike. It is a replica, not the original. I think the original's in heaven, and that's only a replica. But however, other bikes that I've been involved with is, of course, the Ariel and the Bultaco. When I left Ariel, I went to Bultaco in Spain and designed the 4-speed Bultaco Sherpa, which really revolutionized the trials world. After that, really, unfortunately, the British industry disappeared and it became the Spanish Armada, as they say, with all the Spanish bikes taking over.